Welcome to this episode of Level with Emily Reese, featuring a conversation with French composer Thomas Brunet about his music for the game Chants of Sennaar. Chants of Sennaar is a puzzle game where you're basically learning to translate languages as you progress. It's a genre called Knowledgevania. And the music for Chants of Sennaar is gorgeous. I absolutely love it. It includes a lot of soloists like flutes, clarinets, there's a singer, and a lot of really great musical performances. Originally, Thomas has always been a musician, but originally he studied French literature and taught that for many years, so we talk about that a bit toward the end. He's also a gamer, so we talk about how he spent his gaming time in 2023. And now he's actually going back to teaching. He's created a master's program for music and sound design in Bordeaux, so he talks about that a bit too. Join us on Discord, that link down in the show notes. Be sure to subscribe to this YouTube channel and listen to the audio version too. That's where you're going to hear the music. We don't put music in our YouTube episodes. All right, here is Thomas Brunet talking about Chants of Sennaar.
Sure. So Chants of Sennaar is a puzzle game which has a linguistics aspects to it, which means you will get to translate different languages. And I have seen several times now the kind of new term that has been around for a bit, but not really in the mainstream medias. And they call it Knowledgevania, the genre of games like Outer Wilds, Return of the Obra Dinn, Heaven's Fold. We've been compared to these games a lot, and with good reason, because the inspirations are for everyone to see. And Knowledgevania basically means that your progression is only blocked by the amount of knowledge that you have. So in this game, what that means is you appear in a kind of huge tower, not unlike the Tower of Babel, I don't know.
Babel, yeah.
Pronounce that.
Oh, that's okay, Babel, yeah.
And you understand nothing, and you have no clue what's happening to you. You have no clue what all the NPCs or the non-playable characters are telling you. And so you have to, using context clues and using maybe the behaviors of other characters, you have to understand little words here and there, kind of like when you travel to a foreign country and you see the signs and they're like, what? I don't understand anything. But after a while, you get accustomed to, okay, so this might mean, I don't know, toilets. This might mean, and this game works in a very similar way and by design. So you're very much confused when you arrive here, and it's kind of does a good job in easing you into it by teaching you how the game wants to be played in a way. And so doing the translations and all the more traditional puzzle solving, which we'll talk about later, the game gives you a journal. And in this journal, you'll be able to input manually your hypotheses regarding the meaning of symbols or glyphs, because these languages are not text-based like we understand it usually. They're called logographic languages, which means they're based on symbols or glyphs. And these glyphs each can be translated into one word. At least in French, it works like that, because there has been translations of the game in many other languages. So I don't know about this. But in French or in English, one glyph means one word. And so the game doesn't really analyze at all your hypothesis. So you can write basically what you want. You don't need to have the right spelling. You don't even need to have the right, the actual exact word, because when the time comes later to validate your translations, what happens is you'll have to associate one glyph with a drawing in the journal. So if you have the general idea, your brain will make the connection between the drawing and the symbol. So that's the main mechanic of the journal. And then if you have longer sentences, maybe related to something important, like another puzzle, your character will write it down in the journal so you can jog your memory and draw a little bit of the context in which you have seen these words. And so that's the main mechanic. And then, of course, you have different people in this tower which you have to explore. And each level has its own culture, its own architecture, and obviously its own music. Mm-hmm. And so these peoples kind of live in isolation from each other, and you'll have to discover why. And by doing so, you'll also understand the way each of them think about the world and about each other. And once you've grown accustomed to the way the game works, you'll have to basically progress using only your own skill as a player, like deduction, memory, observation skills. There's no health bar, there's no fighting, there's no inventory to speak of. Not in the traditional sense, like, oh, I picked up a new weapon, I'm more powerful till the end of the game.
Yeah. Which
is pretty fun, but not in this case. And that's also a characteristic of this newly branded knowledge-vania genre, is that you don't have any skill tree in game, but the skills you're using are your own as a player, and it seems to make players a lot more involved in this process than in other types of games.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess that wraps it up.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you mentioned there's different castes, I think they're called in the game, right? Different groups or tribes or castes. And are there, because I haven't played it, but I, of course, watched a lot of it, but not enough to know if there are 4 or 5 different ones. Are there 4 or 5? Or is that a spoiler?
Okay. No, I mean, it's usually, if you've watched the trailer or if you've played just a little bit, or, I guess it could be a mild spoiler, so beware. But it's not one of the big reveals. We already know there's several people. Let's say that. So
yes, we can end there. I have my own theories because I do know what happens at the end. So, but when we won't be discussing that in any great detail. But so needless to say, there are at least 4 different casts that you have written music for. And yes. They each, as you said, have a different floor or different level in this Tower of Babel. I realized I was muted when I was affirming you said it right, Babel. Or not right, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So, and the music is great because it's live instruments and I don't know if you knew a throat singer personally, maybe some samples, but tell me about kind of coming up with the sounds that you did use, because there's a little bit of everything, which is wonderful, but then there's also just a beautiful list of, people who played violin, cello, oboe, English horn, or cor anglais, flutes, clarinets, and the singer. So tell me about coming up with that sound.
So the main idea behind building these cultures, because the music is linked to each culture in the game, is that we needed something to affirm what you can already see if you observe like the visuals of the game, is that these peoples are here have been here for a very long time, and we needed to not only use ancient instruments like lyres, lots of strings, winds, a little bit of percussions, and this is like the first layer of it. Is the first thing that popped into my head was, okay, will need ancient instruments, so probably samples, and actually a lot of the oldest instruments in the score are samples.
Okay.
And then I knew that all the thematic material would need, professional musicians, because there's no way you can do a score like this for such an uh, intimate, like human-sized, almost poetic experience without having a human sound. And at first, I didn't really know exactly what instruments I was gonna record live. I knew I wanted a cello because it's such an expressive instrument to me. And then the oboe also arrived pretty early. Some parts were better played on the English horn, which Isabelle Debat, our oboe player, is very specialized in English horn, actually. She's a principal English horn in the National Bordeaux Orchestra, which
Oh,
is kind of
wow.
a rare spot, I think.
Yeah.
Not all orchestras have a principal English horn player.
Yeah.
And she's obviously totally amazing with both
Yeah.
instruments. So these were the first two instruments that came to my mind when it came to, giving the score a human-sized sensibility to it. I knew it was going to be heavily melodic, because I wanted to use um, what I learned when studying traditional music from different regions of the world. So I studied Brazilian music, African music, and music from the Indian Ocean. And of all sorts of different places were explored there. You mentioned throat singing. This is also sampled. And
Yeah.
so the traditional, like, popular music is almost only about either dancing or melody. So it had to be, in my mind, it had to be heavily melodic, and I think the game works quite well with this kind of stuff. Although there are some bits and pieces of more sound designy, atmospheric music, mostly towards the end of the game with, synth pads and stuff like that. Um, and obviously, flutes came also right after, because that's one of the oldest instruments you can imagine, probably.
Yeah.
Um, and vocals was actually a later addition, because the studio wanted vocal performance on kind of like the main theme of the game, which is the one you hear at the very end.
Okay.
And I hired Carla Fernandez to sing on it, and she did a beautiful job.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed writing additional music for her, and I kind of like managed to use some of this session time to also record two other tracks with her. And obviously, I was inspired by all the work surrounding the architecture. The
Yeah.
visuals of the game are usually patchworks, like mixing influences, say, from India and the Eastern Europe, or maybe medieval Western Europe. And all these influences also stayed in the back of my mind. Although one of the most important challenges was we didn't want any of these soundscapes to be directly identifiable as, okay, these people are the Vikings, let's say, or these people
Yeah.
are our fictional Spanish. I don't know.
Yeah.
It really needed to stay in the fictional because all the allegory works a lot better like that. And yeah, I try to leverage all the different traditions I knew about, and then I discovered some more in the process. It was really, really amazing working with Randisk, which are based in Toulouse, which you mentioned earlier.
Okay. Okay.
So we did all this remotely. I think I met them maybe 3 times.
Wow.
So the development started in 2020, March of 2020,
Oh,
if you can believe
wow.
that. So best time ever
Yep.
to
Wow.
launch yourself into a new adventure.
Oh,
But I was
man.
hired way later than that. I started working with them in April 22.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Okay. Now, how
during
did that happen? How did you get connected?
well, um I'm a bit hesitant with this story because it seems like it never happens like this, and it happened to me. What happened was they found me on Twitter, and then at the right moment, because obviously they found me because they were looking for a game composer, which ticked all the boxes, meaning, several, like a background in traditional music, like world music, I guess you would say. I don't know that applies to me, but yeah. Um,
Yeah.
Music, like local music and traditionally played. And then a little bit of synth work, and also, very acoustic based music, because that's what the game needed. So, it's a right place at the right time kind of thing. But they found me, they listened to music I had online, and they contacted me. And
Wow.
I sent them 2 demos, sprinkled, like sample instruments sprinkled with recordings I make in my home studio, and then they were hooked, and we started working together almost immediately, which was awesome. And I feel, it's not that I didn't work towards this, but sometimes it feels very random and very dependent on luck. All these affairs with how do you, and everyone asks me how I came into this business, and there's a lot of desire from people to know about it and to know how do you get into. And it's the same in the entertainment business, in the film industry and everything. There's a whole bunch of questions around this, and my story feels like, okay, this happened almost like magic, and probably don't count on this happening again. But honestly, I think what's the saying is preparation meets opportunity, or something like that. I guess that's the takeaway from this, is that you can't control when it's going to happen, but you can prepare yourself and learn all the different skills, maybe skills unrelated to music, that you would need if such an opportunity arises, that you can grab it and just roll with it instantly.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, the story is kind of exceptional. I don't think I've heard this as often. As
It's
for
rare.
example, I had this friend who was making a film and called me because he knew I was making music. That's more like the usual
Yeah.
narrative around, how did you make it into the industry. But
Mm-hmm.
I was just trying to control my social media presence, trying to see which ones were the best ratio of efforts versus results, in terms of
Of course.
connections, because being in France and being in the Southwest, connections are tricky to establish. But then once you have one foot in the door, it gets easier and easier. But I
Yep.
started with smaller project, yes, and this one came because I already had
Yeah.
some tracks online, and that's the
Yeah.
story of this.
You mentioned that you studied a bunch of different world musics. It was that independently, or when you were in university, did you do that?
I didn't study music at all in university.
Oh, no kidding.
I did go to what we call conservatoire.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
So
Okay.
they're like superior music schools.
Yep.
Never finished it.
Okay.
But I went to uni to study French literature and
Wow.
language, which is kind of ironic now
Yeah.
because it's kind of joining my two biggest chunks of life.
Yeah.
Because I studied this for a long time, and I was a teacher of French literature and language for seven years.
Oh, wow.
All the while, playing music, and my background is that I'm a percussionist. And I started
Okay.
as a percussionist in orchestras. Well, I should say in wind ensembles, probably because, apart from woodwinds, brass, and percussions, there didn't seem to be a lot of string players. I don't know why. When I
Yeah.
was studying music, at least in my area. So anyway,
Yeah.
and I studied um, world music more independently, but also with a kind of mentor. I enlisted into this Brazilian percussion ensemble, and after a few months, I also was able to conduct it. And then I was, learning all the parts and learning how this, it's a music to accompany singing or to make people dance. And then my mentor in this, who taught me how to, conduct percussions, because it's not remotely as complex as the orchestral conducting, but still,
Yeah.
he's also a singer and a composer, and he brought a lot of his love to traditional music over to me, and then I studied on my own a lot of this,
Wow.
different styles, and
Yeah. I mean, the world of Brazilian percussion that's a rich world. There's so many instruments
oh
and
yes,
styles, right? Rhythms and styles, almost like raga in India, right? Just like it's
yeah,
almost that. Yeah,
yeah,
I
definitely.
love it. Yeah, I mean that all Latin America. What I did, I mean, this has been so long ago now. In the '90s, when I was an undergrad, I was in an Afro-Cuban ensemble, and I
Hmm.
just loved that because half of the ensemble was percussionists. There were like 10 of us, and five of them
Yeah,
were percussionists, which is just such a lovely. It's just what a great world of music. I loved that, and similarly, Brazilian music has quite a spread, doesn't it?
yeah,
Do you
they
have
have a
some
love for.
favorite instruments you'd want to mention quickly for that might be something that folks aren't very familiar with?
Well, usually what people coming into these ensembles want to play instantly are the sordos, because they're this huge um, drums that have a pretty uniquely bottom heavy round sound, and you get to play them very very be very demonstrative, and they they're the backbone of the ensemble. And then um you have the caixa, which is kind of a snare drum, but a little bit smaller and with different, how do you call I guess it's the snare, like the metal part.
Yep, the snare.
It's called snare.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's different materials and it has a very dirty sound, for lack of a better word, like very, it's not a very dry sound. And when you have 10 of them, you definitely feel the momentum.
Yeah.
Because they never stop playing, right?
Yep.
So yeah, it's a different beast from marching bands, like more traditional marching bands, and I love it. And we also played rhythms from different parts, not only from Brazil, which was kind of our little quirk. And we played rhythms from La Réunion, which is this island in the Indian Ocean. It has this very peculiar 6/8 swing feel. It's very hard to describe, especially with my English right now. But it was always somewhere in the back of my head for the last 10 years. And I think it got out in the score to Chants of Sennaar, and one of the tracks I used this. So it's like a triplet, but with a weird swing feel to it, and the accent, instead of being on the first note, is on the second.
Okay.
And you get this very intricate balance between the low instruments playing the strong beats, and then all the other instruments basically accenting the beat right after it. And it's something that's always been. I'm very fond of this.
Which track was that, Thomas?
The one called Envers, which is the one playing in the sewers in level 3.
That's one of my favorite tracks. Yeah, I love that track. Yeah. There's guitar in there. Was that you on guitar, or was that a sample?
No. It's my friend Johan Ugne, who also helped me with the orchestration. And
cool.
We were,
okay.
Yeah. We were in the studio, and there was no time to just do it. Anyway, there were some complications, and I just phoned him and asked him if he could just, live track it from his home studio. We were kind of in the rush of things. So that's the only part that doesn't come from the Studio du Bassin in Arcachon.
Yeah. Oh,
like
yeah.
Outsourcing. Yeah. But yeah, I would have played guitars and the bouzouki and stuff, but we really had, I want to say, a tight budget, and it was, although compared to other indie productions, we having a publisher and all, we were, we don't have to complain, but there's some things I wish I could have recorded, but then when the results came in, like the reviews on Steam and the various comments and analysis and stuff, I was like, okay, never mind.
Right.
if people like it, who am I to
right. People do
regrets.
Really like it. Yeah. If we could talk more about, did you say it was Envers?
Yes.
I really enjoyed this track. Well, I could say that about every single one, for real. But this one starts with the cello, and it's so beautiful. And then I love it when he goes to pizzicato, and like this kind of for a while, he's like doing this whole pizzicato thing, which is fantastic. And then the flute comes in eventually with a really great, I don't know if you would call it the counter melody or the melody or just a motif or how you thought of it, but I love the pattern that the flute plays over top of all of that. So Tell us more about that track, if you would. It's really, really great.
Oh, thank you for asking. I also really love this track. So the motive on the flute is also, I think it's played at 3 different octaves, or maybe 3 different instruments. Can't remember now, it's all a blur, but there's some bagpipe in there, and they all are playing, yes, counter melodies would be the word, I guess, and sometimes a little bit shifted rhythmically. And that's one of the ways I wanted to make the score coherent, was to use it's not a canon, but the little offsetting rhythmically all the counter melodies, so that you kind of like a child babbling. It's like these instruments want to play in unison, but kind of don't manage yet. And this is how I thought about this game, where all these people try to, or don't, but they can't communicate between one another because they don't understand each other. And so flutes and bagpipes in this example are the ones that are trying to start this dialogue. And the context of this track is also peculiar, because I'm trying not to spoil anything there, but there's let's say trouble is brewing. When you hear this, not necessarily trouble, you're not in trouble at that point, but you have this huge labyrinth of sewers to go through. And I've seen people making maps of it, like with pen and paper. Nice. It was amazing. And so the track is pretty long, and accompanies you through the sometimes frustrating experience of finding your way through this maze. And I've said trouble is brewing because you can see some people on this level have it better than others, and as you progress, you'll understand a little bit more of the friction between peoples and why these frictions appear. And so one of these groups is kind of unhappy about its fate and wants things to change. And there's revolt is in the air. And this is the track where I've used this rhythm from La Réunion, which I talked about, because turns out this rhythm I learned while learning one style called the Maloya, which is the style of music they play and dance to, and also sing, obviously, in La Réunion. And at some point, of course, this was French colony, and the French government kind of prohibited this kind of music for there's political reasons. And I don't think there's a actual law stating you can't play Maloya, but certainly people were getting into trouble and playing them in underground locations and hiding. And so it became this symbol of resistance to the French government, and it inspired me to kind of this little cultural I don't know, element of history.
Yeah.
And that I want to instill in this. And then there's also the didgeridoo, which is here to cover the low end of things. And it's a pretty energetic track for basically you stumbling your way through a maze. So basically the music is telling you something that the game, or rather is telling you what the game is saying indirectly, the music is very direct about, that there's some suffering and some violence in there in this world, as well as beauty. And, you spend a lot of time marveling at the visuals, the crazy landscapes, very beautiful work from Julien Moya. And at some point you see past the beauty of this and the way some people live at the detriment of others. It's a pretty profound experience, and it tells you a lot about the world we live in, actually.
Yeah. Loved it. The very first track on the soundtrack, which I did not write down. Oh, Out of the Cavern and Into the Light. Is that correct? Yes. You mentioned, many, many minutes ago now about, flute being one of the oldest instruments that we can think of, right? Beyond percussion.
Or maybe vocals
or
as well,
the voice, right? Or the voice. But certainly one of the oldest, probably the oldest reed or wind instrument. And I think a lot. I when I was younger, I was not really a fan of flute. And, when you look back on life, you're like, yeah, maybe that was more about the flute players, because I love flute. You just kind of reflect on things differently as you get older. And because I do love flute, and I love it very much. And when it comes in that first track, there is something so familiar to it when I heard it. It was one of the more profound flute entries that I've experienced in life.
Wow.
Just because, it was really interesting. It of an experience, and I really appreciate that, because it happens sometime about a minute in or something like that, and you've already set up a really interesting soundscape. There's, I think, Duduk in the beginning there or something as well, and and so you're and this is my point that I promise I'm getting to, is how you talked about also earlier, not going into musical expectations of, well, these are the Vikings, this is the Middle Eastern culture, this is the American culture, this is the and blending these things, because you really don't hear a lot of solo Duduk in this very intimate pared down texture that you have, then with flute coming in as well, So I really think that that's one of the reasons it struck me so much, is because of the contrast, right? Because flute is very much a Western instrument. Obviously that kind of flute is very much a Western instrument.
It is a modern flute when you record it live, because otherwise tuning problems are...
Of course. Yeah. And so, but just to pair that with the Duduk, I just thought, I just hypothesized that maybe that's what struck me so much. I'm not really sure, but I really liked it. So well done on combining these sounds, Yeah.
Yeah, there's I guess... shyness to using the Duduk after Gladiator, and I remember one where a movie where Goldsmith also used it. Was the Russia House?
I'm not sure.
I don't know. Duduk has been around for a long time in film scores, and it also, I was tempted to use it even more. Then I decided against it, because there were I thought there were more interesting things to do with it, as well as I started playing with the idea of leitmotifs, like character motifs, and maybe some kind of instrument that would maybe symbolize the playable character. This kind of devices. And then it struck me as not very, very interesting in itself. And then I reflected that this game was not about you putting yourself in the shoe of someone else as much as it was you yourself putting your own personality and your own skills into this world. So the character is kind of like a ghost vessel. It's not very important. Of course, it's important to the story what your character is and who he is or she, but it didn't really strike me as useful to say, okay, I want to give him a musical voice. Like, you know, it works in Peter and the Wolf, but it doesn't really work, in my opinion, to that in that context. And I actually decided to use flutes whenever I wanted to convey this feeling of this very peculiar feeling of loneliness you get when you're actually in a crowd, but you have no clue what's going on and what they are trying to say, because you obviously people are trying to communicate to you and nothing happens here. And it's a very, very peculiar feeling. Also combine this kind of melancholy feeling with the beauty of this world, and you get a very mixed bag of I'm totally lost, but this is so pretty. And so there's to me there's something about the sound of a flute, like a simple flute, maybe an alto flute, or a wooden flute. I have played several on the demos for this game. Actually, most of the flute tracks I've played beforehand on with my very limited skills on different, traditional flutes I collect from my travels. I have a very nice Romanian peasant flute.
Nice.
Here. And
yes.
You see, there is no mouthpiece actually to this one. This is the kind of flute I try to play to the best of my limited ability. But then I know what if I, a mediocre flute player, can do it. I know in the hands of an experienced flute player, this is going to sound really good because it's idiomatic. It's written for the flute.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, the sound of a flute, like a wooden flute or even an alto flute, or any kind of flute, makes me kind of. I made a parallel between this sound, what it made me feel, and this combination of, marveling and also feeling completely lost. There's something about a flute that can be very melancholic to me.
Yeah.
And also very, very cheerful at times. So every instrument I try to also write in a way that they can express all the different sides of their instrument and maybe have fun doing it. So I guess that's also part of the job, to make sure they don't, they can actually breathe and play what's on the page, but not only what's on the page, and also give it their own kind of, breathe their own life into it.
Yeah. I want to give some love and respect to the clarinet too, the clarinetist, because there's just some beautiful, quote unquote normal B flat clarinet, but then there's also gorgeous bass clarinet and whatever other clarinets you maybe had.
Just the two.
Okay. Yeah. Just loved it all. Especially Temple of Knowledge is a really good example. The clarinet comes in, and Carla is in that track too. And tell us about that track, Temple of Knowledge, without
Temple
spoilers,
Knowledge,
if possible.
Yeah. It's obviously the title kind of, orients the nature of the location where it's played. But Yeah, so it starts with this solo B-flat clarinet, lovely playing by Johan Huguenet. Also, very same one, which I mentioned about orchestrating and playing the guitar on that.
Okay.
Very multifaceted instrument player. Although, all the other ones were also very versatile, and I have nothing but good things to say about the musicians. So yeah, he played the B-flat clarinet, and then I wrote lyrics for Carla, and we really wanted to stick to fictional world building and fictional languages. So at first, I submitted the idea, what about writing songs in French? After all, it's 100% French production. And, it wasn't such a good idea. I recognize it now. But at the time, I was like, yeah, why not? And they said, we really think it should be non-recognizable. It should be, just syllables. So I wrote something I thought would sound good. And of course, Carla gave her own interpretation of these random syllables. And one of the best experience I have ever witnessed was experimenting in the studio with musicians. And at this level, they look at the page, they see your intent written down, and they understand the music before they hear it and before they play it. And then I can't even count the number of first takes that are on the final score.
Oh, wow.
But there were also times where we were just experimenting with all the possibilities of their instruments or her voice. In the case of Carla, and she can do it all. She sings Southern American music. She sings jazz. She also teaches jazz singing.
Wow.
And in that case, we experimented with the different timbres, and maybe, adding air here and there, adding fragility to her voice sometimes allowed us to get to the very nitty-gritty of what makes something human and what makes it resonate in your inside, somewhere around here. There's something about the human voice, unlike any other instruments, that really grabs your attention and gets to your heart. I think we were trying to generate at least a fraction of this effect.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And yeah, the best moments were experimenting. We didn't have a lot of time for that, unfortunately, but I just wish the next time will be a little bit more of that, let's say.
Yeah.
Like I enjoy writing a lot, obviously, but then it's a total different thing when you give your music to someone who has a different background, who is an expert in their instruments, and they can make it sound in a million different ways you haven't really imagined. So It's still what's written on the page, and what people find usually very surprising. And I tell them, yeah, that's why we have so many different recordings of classical pieces, because there is no two conductor, there is no two orchestras that play the same. And so but the page is the page.
Yeah.
And what changes is what you play, almost how you play between the notes. And I've listened to quite a number of your episodes after you contacted me, and I discovered your podcast. And I think I don't remember if it was Gareth Coker saying something really struck me about how orchestras can play very fast and challenging passages, especially film score orchestras. But then also, if you give them a whole note, the way they can play this whole note is, you would never imagine a whole note could be as rich and as enchanting. And that's kind of the I tended towards simplicity, not only because of budget or because of my own limitations as a composer, but also because I think, just like this game is based on everything that's not necessarily said, the music is also about what's between the notes and what does it say about how we think about art, how we perform art. It's a very introspective game, actually. So
yeah, very intimate. The music is very intimate. All of the things. I do want to switch gears just for a moment before we go back to music. So I don't want to give you whiplash, but I am very curious about your passion for French literature, and if there was just a handful of French. Well, first of all, what era of French literature are you most passionate about, or is it? Tell me.
I mostly studied modern literature, which means starting basically in the 16th, 17th century onwards. Further than that, I still studied Latin and ancient French, but not really as deeply, because that's a whole different discipline in university.
Yeah.
So I've always been kind of a avid reader, although nowadays it's hard to find the time, and just like playing games is becoming a rare commodity in my schedule. But yeah, I have this. I mean, the studying it was a joy, and then teaching was another beast entirely. But
yes,
I'm still fond of writers like, to put it simply, like Victor Hugo. He's basically the most well-known French writer of all time, and you can still read his books and think, well, he was right, and he still is. So that's the magic about this kind of works that I really like to communicate to my students. And I think it also made me a bit more ready to score this particular game because of all the layers of meaning. You can delve pretty deep, and it's almost like a book where every player gets to be the writer at some point. Because you can decide in which order you're gonna do things, and examples of this like Outer Wilds and others, where basically the only thing stopping you from finishing the game is your own knowledge and your own skills. And when you finally get to where you're supposed to go, you're like, okay, I could have done this 10 hours ago if I had known. Yeah. Which is why also most people, when they finish the game and they hop on Twitter to say, oh my God, you should play this. I wish I could forget it to play it again. Because obviously the magic is not the same if you play it a second time.
Yep.
I mean, of course, I guess I personally would play it, I think, once every 2 years, or just to reminisce it's a very
Yeah.
short game, so
Yeah.
it's not a problem. But then, yeah, part of the experience is to go in blindly. And I've digressed again. And I'm
No, that's
done.
okay. It's very much on your mind. You know, you've been in this world for a
Yeah,
while, so it makes sense, and that's totally fine.
yeah.
What are some of the things that you really want to point out that I didn't ask you, or maybe it's a favorite track that that we didn't mention? What are some of those things for you?
I love first of all, obviously the soundtrack album is a version of the score which is almost half of it. There's an hour and 22 minutes, if I remember correctly, of music in the game, and the soundtrack is just shy of 40 minutes.
Yeah.
So there was
It's
some
not enough,
heartbreaking
Thomas.
choices. I know. I know.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it's a combination of factors leading to this. I had to make some incredibly tough choices. So some of the tracks I love dearly are not on the album, which means, yeah, you'll have to play the game if you want to hear more. I'm sorry, but no, I want to say, I guess my mindset right now is I wouldn't have believed you if you told me 6 months ago that this would be the path I would have taken. And we've discussed how events can happen, seemingly unexpectedly, but then, of course, you work towards a certain path and you'll find a way somehow. And I guess I found it now. And it's really, the reception of the game was incredible and still is. And
Yes.
just yesterday, we were able to announce that the soundtrack was nominated at the Steam Awards. So
Wonderful.
players, I don't know how many of them have to vote for a nomination like that to be effective, but it's really starting to hit me that this was indeed a good decision. And but I never really doubted that the game would be incredible. Of course, you can never know how it's going to work for other people, but what the developers tried to do in the spare time, because none of them were professionals, I think it's probably going to change now. I hope it's all I hope for them.
Yes.
What they wanted to achieve was to make a game they would have loved to play, and then if it worked for others, all the better. But I think it's a nice thing to realize that if you are an artist and you work towards something that resonates with you and that you really care about, I guess there is a public for your work. Whether this public, there's an audience for your work. Whether this audience finds it or not is a different question. But I think they had a really healthy and powerful mindset from the beginning, combined with exceptional organizational skills.
Yes. Yes.
It's a team of two people.
Amazing.
And I think if you take into account sound designer Roman Cabezot and me and Julien Moya's wife, who did the drawing in the journal, and
Oh, wow.
Laurent Aujean, who did some of the visual assets, then it's 6 people. And I think just the music team is bigger than this. So
Right. Yeah.
it's something to realize the power of just the sheer willpower it took for these two
Yes.
people to get to the end of this project, because it's kind of a small miracle when a game ships
Absolutely.
in 2023
Yes.
and still manages to, as an indie game where with basically no expectation because no one knew about us,
Right.
to achieve what they achieved, being nominated at the Game Awards.
It's amazing.
Very, very humbling experience. And, you just have to. The imposter syndrome is hitting harder than it ever was. And the way I treated this syndrome is by working harder and trying to kind of deserve this, after the fact.
Yeah.
No, but we're really, really happy. And I don't think I realize yet what all this means. But yeah, we'll see. There are
To be
already
discovered.
repercussions.
There have been repercussions, you say?
Yes,
Positive, I assume positive. Yeah.
Very, very positive repercussions. I will get to reunite with my teaching experience, but this time with video game music. And I've been asked to coordinate and create a program, a master's degree for video game music and sound design in Bordeaux.
Oh, wow.
Which is I think it's very rare in France. I think probably Paris, Angoulême, maybe a few schools have them, but it's definitely not that often that you get these kind of programs. So I'm looking forward to it, working on this and seeing what else is out there. And obviously I would be more than happy to work with Rundisk again once they've taken a breather and really relaxed after all of this.
Wow. Well, all the accolades are well deserved, and I hope that you're able to move past the imposter syndrome.
Oh yeah.
It's very well deserved accolades, and just thank you for writing such wonderful music. I feel so fortunate to get to have met you and spoken with you and spent time with your music. It's just been a delight. So I can't wait to hear whatever you got coming up next. And yeah, so thank you for your time.
Well, likewise, thank you. And I'm adding my voice to the many people you've interviewed who cannot say enough good things about your episodes.
Oh,
and
thank you.
It's true that we get to. It's not often that we get to talk about some of the things we mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you. I think you've made someone very happy when I realized I had 300 episodes of game music content to binge in the car during long drives. I drive a lot, and
oh, do you?
This was like Christmas. Yeah.
Oh, really?
This was like Christmas to me. It's like my first reaction was, oh my God, there's the names in there are okay, this is the real deal. And the second reaction was, but I get to, first of all, how did I not know about this? I have no idea. But so I'm kind of an avid podcast consumer, especially if it's about games or game audio in general.
Yeah.
But I'm sorry to say I've not discovered yours.
Well, you have
and now
now.
I'm so happy because I get to spend more time with all these
that's awesome
gigantic composers and also musicians.
Yeah.
I've seen you interviewed not only composers. That's really important.
Yeah.
To give them a voice, and they have incredible stories of their own.
Mm-hmm. It's true.
So I can't wait to get back to it.
I'm so glad. I do have just a couple more questions now that I'm thinking about it. You had mentioned, and of course, we all call him Victor Hugo. I'm so sorry that we call him that.
Don't be.
But
He's not going to begrudge that.
It's true. It's true. If there, I don't want to make you say if there's one book you wish people would read, but just give us some recommendations, if you would, for people who haven't read any of his works. Like what are maybe 2 or 3 or 1 if you want to go to 1. Would you make a recommendation to us?
Of course, yeah. I think Les Miserables is
that's a good
very, very universal story, and I didn't study as deeply his life as I did his work, but I don't know from what place he came, because obviously he was not a part of the kind of people he writes about, the really poor people in Paris.
Yeah.
But he certainly had a keen eye, at least, and a sense of story. He was a believer in the human being, and so yeah, don't watch the movies. Read the book.
Right, of course. Yeah. The other thing that I wanted to ask, you said you don't have a lot of time to do it anymore, but you are a gamer. So what are you playing right now when you have time to play?
I just finished Baldur's Gate 3, and I'm so, obviously I was hooked.
Yep.
Like many people, and it deserves all the praise it got.
Yeah.
But it means that 100 hours were not devoted to other games. But this year I've been able to play a bit of Jedi Survivor as well.
Okay.
And for the the smaller side of things, I've started playing Chia, and
yes.
I am so happy. I've decided, when we were nominated for the Game Awards against Chia and other wonderful games, I've decided I would cheer if Chia won, even if it means that we didn't get it, because such a lovely game, such an unexplored part of our collective culture. This part of the world, in video games is pretty much unknown, and then the way they did it is also very much worthy of praise, as well as the content of the game itself, the way it uses all the myths and legends over there. It reminded me of La Réunion, even though, like 2 oceans apart, but it resonated with me through my own background, and I haven't been able to finish it yet. But I can't wait to get to this point. And obviously the music is an immense part of
so wonderful.
What makes this game so it really captures you. We were talking about the power of the human voice, and the singing in Chia's score is amazing. And John Robert Matz has really done well in capturing and respecting the culture. I think I obviously no expert, but and it seems to come from a place of love and understanding, and using local musicians. The efforts that were made mean that so I decided, what, I'm not gonna be sad if Chia wins, and Chia won, and I'm happy because it's we need more of this in the world, definitely. And I've also started playing Stray Gods. And this is not a game I would normally pick up, but if it wasn't for Austin Wintory's score, I think he's one of the composers I just when I see he released something, I just buy the game and play it just on his name alone. And I'm not the only one.
Right. No, of course not. Yeah.
There's nothing I can say that hasn't been said about him, and of course the endeavor he undertook was like, I think it's probably the biggest ratio of music budget compared to overall game budget in history.
It would have to be. Yeah.
And I really, really hope that you make an episode about this with Austin Wintry. I would listen to this.
I see. Okay.
Avidly.
He's on the list. I haven't had him on. You know, I think we talked last year. I'm spacing on what, but I need to. It was probably Aliens. The Aliens game he did, I think, is the last time we chatted. But yeah, you're right. You're the first person who's confronted me about this, by the way, which I find amazing.
Confronted you? In what way? Like
that was
you should invite him.
Poor choice of words. Who has made the recommendation? Let's say that.
What have you done with Austin?
Yeah. I should email him. I should. Yes, you're right. It would be amazing because I played it too. I got a ways into it. I haven't finished it yet, but yeah, that'd be a good reason to, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And this is one of those games you can play a million times and get a million different scores. How often do we get that counts?
It's incredible. I know.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Well, Thomas,
but I guess you have a lot on your plate, so don't feel attacked.
It's hard now because I've gone back full time in radio, so I work Monday through Friday 9 to 5, which I hadn't been doing for a while. I was just freelancing, so I would say, in a way, it almost felt like I was busier, but. But the job I have, I put a lot of energy into. So we've gone back to every other week with this podcast, the only podcast I do, which is unfortunate, because it means I think I have you scheduled. I can tell you when you're scheduled for, and it's like ages from now. It's in 2024, which is so sad to me. It's
well, it's only a few days away.
It's in February.
Nice.
Yeah. So that's been the downfall of that. But I mean, you do what you need to do in life, but
exactly.
it's life, and I love that work too. So but anyway,
I'm glad you haven't. I'm glad you kept up with this podcast.
Oh, of course. Yeah, no,
Once I have listened through all 300 episodes. I'm
sure there are some you could skip. I don't know.
I would surely want more.
Fair enough. Just like I feel when I get to the end of Chants of Sennaar soundtrack, I always want more. So, touche.
Well, I hope we get to do this again because
we will. We should talk once you get your program set up. I would love to hear more about that.
Okay.
I mean, that would be fascinating. What's the timeline for that? Are they wanting you to have that by next year?
Are not inscriptions. How do you say registration?
Yeah,
is open already.
Oh wow!
But it's really, really fresh. Like I think a few weeks.
Okay.
A few weeks ago, they published it on the website, and a few conferences and salons will be necessary to dip our toes in the water and see how many people are interested. But there's only so much space, and it's first of all, it's not a full-time in-house position. Composers are not usually.
Right.
In-house sound designer certainly are, but this program will aim to form very few people to just so they have a chance to actually work in the industry and not be 30 people in a classroom and only two of
Right.
them have hope.
Yeah.
We're going towards leaning towards this. So yeah, a blend of music and sound design, all the aspects of it. We'll see how that turns out. So the first classes will be in October 2024.
Oh, okay.
So
Yeah.
anytime in between would be great to talk about it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Well, thank you again so much. I know I've said it a lot,
Thank you,
but
Emily.
I mean it from the bottom of my heart. It's been a pleasure, and we'll make sure we do this again sometime, Thomas. So thanks again.
Well, yes, yes, please.